I received a question from one of our Knit Along Club members in our private members only Facebook group asking, does anyone know of a good book that has drawings or very clear pictures of what the yarn is supposed to look like on the needle? I get so confused when I have had to take out stitches. Sometimes I wind up with what looks like twisted stitches and I'm not sure why. So I thought I would address this in a video. If you're having the same kind of trouble where you can't tell if your stitches are mounted properly on your needle, then you're in the right place. There's two main reasons that stitches become mounted backwards on your needle. Either they got twisted when you picked up drop stitches, or you wrapped your yarn backwards when performing a stitch. But either way, it results in a stitch being backwards. So at first glance, these stitches all look real normal. But some of the stitches I have purposely mounted backwards or upside down or twisted on the needle, but you can't really tell just by looking at it like this. So in this lesson, I'm going to talk about the front of the stitch and the back of the stitch. Now the front of the stitch is the stitch that's on the front side of the needle when you're holding your work as if you're going to knit it. So I've started this row. As you can see here, I'm about 4 stitches into the row. So I'm holding the work as if I would be if I were knitting it. So the front of the stitches, you're always holding the work as you would when you're going to knit it, is the part of the stitch that's here on the front of the needle. And the back of the stitch, conversely, is the part of the stitch that's here on the back of your needle. So when you pull the stitches apart, that's when you can start to see they actually do slant a little bit. Now, it is subtle, but can you see these stitches slant just a little bit towards the left so that the front of the stitch is closer to the needle tip than the back of the stitch is? It's just very subtle. But if you look at these next 3 stitches, they are leaning the other way. So the back of the stitch is closer to my needle tip than the front of the stitch is, which means that makes them lean toward the right. These 3 stitches are mounted upside down. These 3 stitches are mounted correctly. So I'm going to knit those first 3 stitches because they are mounted correctly, and show you how to fix the improperly mounted stitches. Whoops, I've got my yarn all kind of wrapped around here. All right. There we go. All right, so I'm going to knit these first 3 stitches. Now don't worry if you knit continental style like I do or English style. The information in this lesson is going to be the same. So I'm going to drop my working yarn because I don't need to do it to fix this stitch. There's a couple of ways to fix a stitch that's twisted. Now you can really see on that first stitch when I pull the work out how that back leg is closer to the tip than the front leg of the stitch is. It kind of opens up into a triangle almost, with the back leg being closer to the front of the needle, the tip of the needle. So to fix that stitch, I'm just going to insert my working needle into the back leg of the stitch, pop it off, and put it back on the stitch the right way. Now, when I stretch it out, you can see that the front leg of the stitch is closer to the needle tip. And I'm going to knit that stitch because now I have it mounted properly. And on the next stitch, I will show you another way to fix a twisted stitch. You actually don't have to do it in 2 steps. You don't have to pop it off like I just did, but to show you again, if you want to pop it off and flip it over, just insert your needle into the back of the stitch, pop it off, and pop it back on the left needle. Now, to do it all in one step, you can simply knit through the back loop. So you insert your needle almost like you're going to purl, but you have your yarn in back and you're inserting it into the back of the stitch. Then you wrap your yarn like you normally do and knit it. And because you've knit in the back of the stitch, it untwists the stitch as you knit it. Now, let's look at a few more. So this next stitch, I'm going to slide it up on the tip of my needle. You can see when I pull it, that front leg is closer to the tip, so that one's properly mounted. So I will knit that one. And again, you see how the front leg is closer to the needle tip. It's kind of open up in a triangle. The left leg is to the left, or the back leg is to the left. The front leg is to the right, closer to the needle tip. So I will knit that one because that one is properly mounted. And this one, if I pull it, the back leg is closer to the needle tip, so I'm going to knit that through the back loop to fix it. So insert the needle like I'm going to purl, but I insert it into the behind the left needle rather than in front of it. Then I wrap the yarn like I'm going to knit and slide it off. This next one, what do you think? Yep, that one is mounted properly. So I'll knit that one. And this one is mounted improperly. As you can see, the back leg is closer to the needle tip. Now I'm going to do this one English style. So I'm going to again insert the needle into the back of the stitch, then wrap my yarn just like I always do when I knit. Knit the stitch, slide it off. That fixes the twisted stitch as I knit it. So this one is mounted properly. So I'll knit that one. And I'm going to get to a yarn over here because I want to show you a yarn over too in just a second. This one is mounted properly. This one is mounted backwards. So for your English style knitters, again, insert the needle into the back, wrap the yarn like you always do, bring it through, slide the stitch off. That fixes it. Okay, so here we're getting close to the yarn over. And I wanted to show you this too because a yarn over looks a little bit different from a regular stitch when it's on your needle. So here's two regular stitches, and if we spread them apart, I don't remember, they are mounted correctly, these two. And I think all the rest of them are mounted correctly. I didn't want to confuse things by having incorrectly mounted stitches and the yarn over stitch. But now, can you see that this stitch right here looks a little bit different than all the rest? It leans more to the left and it's got more of an opening below it. That's a yarn over. Now I'm going to knit up to that yarn over and show you what it looks like if it's on the needle backwards. So this yarn over is mounted correctly because the front of the stitch again is closer to the needle tip than the back of the stitch, so it has this kind of leftward lean because the front leg is closer to the needle tip. If I purposely mount that stitch backwards, there we go, you can see the stitch now leans to the right and the back of the stitch is closer to the needle tip than the front of the stitch. So two things, the yarn overs have more of an opening below them than a regular stitch, and they lean the same as regular stitches. And again, you can either pop this off and flip it over and then knit it like normal, or for a backwards yarn over, you can also knit it through the back loop just like a regular stitch, and that straightens it out. So I hope that helps you understand better to be able to recognize when your stitches are mounted incorrectly on your needle.